Welcome to the Keeping It Real show, your one-stop shop for weird news, off the beaten path, spooky, otherworldly, and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Yardley, and you can follow Keeping It Real show on Twitter at creepin_it. You can email us at creepingitrealshow@gmail.com, and you can go to our website, keepingitrealshow.com. And without further ado, I'll introduce my co-hosts, Moni and Kristi. How are you doing, Moni?
Good morning. Hello. I'm doing well. How are you guys today?
Outstanding. And you, Kristi, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for the intro, Yardley. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in the state of Georgia, and I'm excited to be on this new podcasting venture with both of you ladies.
As am I. I'm super excited. I wanted to just do a really quick introduction, a little more specific about both of you, and then I as well. Moni is in California, so Yardley and I are both in Atlanta, so we have a little bit of a time difference here, but we're doing the best we can to merge together and make this as best we can. Moni, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, representing for California, the minute that I said good morning, I was like, is it still morning over where you guys are? But I am in wine country in Temecula, not hitting the wine yet at 8 a.m., and it is going to be 102 degrees here today. So we're looking at another hot one, but it is beautiful. And I am a resident geek here on this podcast. I am a librarian and I am a comic book nerd. And that's really big on pop culture. The most that we're going to need to know about me for now.
Okay, Yardley?
Well, I am a guy born and raised in Georgia, and I have dabbled in animation and community outreach. I've been podcasting for 7 years for indie radio, and we cover actually a spectrum of television podcasts, relationship shows, and a couple of ventures that deal with kind of an artist enclave where we interview a lot of aspiring artists and some people who are a little bit better known than others. So that's always great to kind of expand into the arts, something that I think that we're lacking these days. But it's been a nice run, and this would be my first time doing a podcast that will talk about paranormal or weird news. So that's exciting to me. So we'll see how this works out. But as of right now, it's feeling pretty good.
Awesome. Yardley, how many podcasts are you in right now?
Off the top of my head, probably about 7. But some of these podcasts, or some of the most popular that we've dealt with, are shows that have come to their conclusion. Black Sails was one of those shows, and it recently ended, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this year. It was a great podcast. We would get directors and actors from the show to come on. So I'll have to say a nice handful, but as time goes on, I've been lucky enough for when one show is over, it kind of gently segues into the next. So it's been helpful, and we've built a following, and it's always exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think the three of us have all either been on each other's podcasts in the past, or, Moni was a seasoned writer, entertainment writer, and had her own blog, and she was on my podcast. I was on your podcast.
Kristi took my podcast virginity, though. I just wanted to know.
I did.
My one and only so far. So
I hope it was good for you. I really do. And then
we were all drunk, so it was amazing.
It always is. So I was in one podcast years ago, and it was somewhat successful and went for a few years and did really well, and then took a big break, and then I got the bug again. And I think once you start them, it's such a great outlet. And this is one of my favorite topics in the world. Anytime I watch TV, that's the first thing I look for is a horror movie or a paranormal show or My husband thinks
Serial killers.
Yeah, my husband thinks I'm like a serial killer, secret closet serial killer or something. He can't figure it out. But that's, I think, pulling into our first topic is growing up. I have literally had just about every weird thing that could possibly happen to a person. So that's probably what got me started on the whole subject of odd, unusual, mysterious, paranormal. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. So that was one thing, which when you live there at the time, you don't understand how odd things are. And then as you grow up and you go to other towns or cities, you realize, oh, people don't do things this way. And oh, they don't actively talk about alien crashes in their history books in school, So it's kind of an unusual place to grow up. And then I also had kind of pretty much a near-death experience in a really bad car accident. I grew up in a haunted house in Roswell. So bad we had to actually finally move. And just lots, throughout our future podcasts, there's going to be times where I'm going to tie in stuff into personal experiences, and you guys are going to get really tired of hearing about it. You're going to be like, Jesus, what have you not had to deal with? It's pretty crazy. But so I think that's probably what got me started on all this. Who else has experienced something personally that has made you a little more interested in paranormal than others? Moni, have you had anything?
Yeah, so I'm an empath for living humans, which has actually segued into dead humans or spirits, and that will come up later as we continue our podcast. But some very uncomfortable things have happened when I've been around like older cemeteries and that kind of thing. But another big one that I can remember is super interesting. I've told the story on the Bizarre States podcast once before in front of their panel. I was on the Queen Mary with my husband at the so the Queen Mary is in Long Beach. It's the famous ship. I'm sure everybody's probably, if they're into creeping it real and spooky stuff, has heard of some of the paranormal activity that supposedly goes on aboard that ship. And my husband and I were at the totally 80s dance party around Halloween time. And we took a break from dancing, and we were sitting at some banquet tables in a really dark corner where there were no exits or entrances, no lights, no anything. And all of a sudden I heard a woman say something. And well, I thought it was a woman, but I just heard someone say something very close to us. And of course, there's no one there but my husband and I sitting at this table, just the two of us. And I looked up at him and I saw him. He's looking across the table at me, kind of strangely. And I said, "What did you say?" And he said, "No, I thought you said something." And all of a sudden, the hairs on the back of our neck, my neck started to stand up. And I said, "I'll tell you what, count to 3, and we'll both at the same time say out loud what we thought we heard. 1, 2, 3. And we both said, 'Can you help me?' And all of a sudden, this cool breeze kind of goes across the table, and we just stared at each other. And we both agreed we heard a woman ask us for help when no one else was there. So that was and he doesn't believe in any of this stuff. So of course it was even extra spooky. So that was our big paranormal experience aboard the Queen Mary.
Wow. I've heard a lot of stories about Queen Mary. I've watched a lot of shows about Queen Mary, actually. So that is not shocking at all. That place is supposed to be pretty. Did you guys stay the night there?
No, and I'd like to do that at some point, and I have other stories from aboard there. There's actually a plaque. They put up stories that guests have told. We have a plaque from a different story that I'll tell at a different time, but no, we have not stayed there overnight, and I really want to because I heard a lot of cool stuff happens.
Well, what I was wondering, and this question is something that I'm posing to both of you, whenever you go to a place that people say is haunted, whether it be a haunted house or a boat or anything else, what part do you think that knowing or hearing stories about this particular place being haunted plays into your head psychologically before you go in, especially if you're going in already seemingly believing in things like this? So do you think that it affects how you feel about that particular place, finding out beforehand that people say it was haunted? Or do you think that it doesn't make a difference one way or the other? Moni.
It totally makes a difference to me because I want something to happen. And honestly, for all the times that I've gone to like the Whaley house or like any other place that's supposedly haunted and wanted, quote unquote, to like have an experience, that's one of the few times, actually, that's one of the only times that I've really had like an experience that anyone else can like validate that they also had with me and shared with me. So there was only one other time where I had any quote unquote evidence of something actually happening. And the rest of the time is just sort of me going like, I felt this or I felt that. And who knows, that could just be totally like me being a crazy person. So yes, it absolutely, I'm just so open and I'm so just like, come on, something happened to me. So I have a cool story, and yeah, that totally affects it. What do you think, Kristi?
Well, I like Moni said earlier, I identify as an empath, and I also identify as sensitive. I'm not full on like a lot of people, but I really go into a lot of places as a skeptic because I can usually tell when I walk in if something's not right. And I mean, I think growing up in a haunted house helped that. I mean, we're talking really almost every day something happening. And I would walk into a room and sit down before my parents even said, finally, this house is haunted, and the hairs on my neck would stand up and the dogs would growl, and you knew something was in the room. And I would run out of the room and say, somebody's broke into the house or somebody's in the house. And they finally had to tell me the house is haunted. So when I walk into a place that people say is haunted, I'm looking like, okay, and I'm sitting there as a skeptic waiting to either feel something, see something, or have an experience that will validate that. And otherwise I leave as I don't think it's haunted, or I don't think there's anything there. So I think it just depends. I could say that where there's smoke, there's fire. So like Moni was saying about Queen Mary, there's so many stories that I wouldn't have to go there with my skeptic hat on. I would walk in there knowing that place is haunted. So that's kind of how I feel. Now, if somebody says my house is haunted and I walk in and I don't feel anything or experience anything, I'm going to be a skeptic about that one. So.
Well, you have to think, a lot of us from the times that we're really young, the concept of there being ghosts or something else is embedded in our subconscious just through reading children's books as well as watching TV, Casper the Friendly Ghost and all types of things like that. So it does seem to be that an otherworldly type thing is embedded in our psychological DNA from a young age. And I think, when you're younger, you're more apt, Scooby-Doo.
My favorite.
Scooby-Doo was pretty interesting because it kind of dabbled into people believing in certain things, and at the end of the episode they show you that it was a bunch of bullshit that you were believing in. So Scooby-Doo was kind of a two-headed sword. It was for people who believed and for skeptics. So everybody got a little bit of something. But it's kind of, your subconscious is a big deal. So I think that definitely plays into people's perceptions of, otherworldly psychic things.
For sure.
I think also if you're open to experiences and you walk in somewhere, you're going to have one. Whereas people that aren't and don't really care or want to experience anything won't. I mean, my dad, growing up in our house, very seldom experienced anything. He was the big skeptic, but he was also at the end the one who ultimately said, we're getting the fuck out of here, because it got so bad that even he couldn't ignore it. And not a month after we moved, we get a phone call from the people living there. Did you know the house is haunted? And we were like, yes, we did. So, I mean, it probably is somewhat, like you said, embedded from childhood. And then, as a child, we have no filters. All our filters and skepticism isn't there. And so that's why you hear so many stories about children experiencing the paranormal a lot more, or an animal, than adults, because I think after a certain point, you're conditioned to just tune all of that out and not see anything. So
for sure. Yeah. So too.
Yeah, that's pretty. It's pretty interesting. Lots of different experiences that you have. An example was when Kristi, when you and I went to St. Louis Cemetery and we went to Madame Laveau's grave, and you could actually see how different people were reacting to it or participating in, leaving a little something at the grave site and all of those types of different things. But you get so many different people. So some of it is the spectacle of people like to visit and like to kind of check. I went to a paranormal site off their bucket list. Some people really do believe in leaving offerings and, saying things to the dead. Do you think that at this point, with the monetization of everything, because, paranormal is bringing some people in big bucks these days. I think some of these people really don't believe in a lot of the stuff they're talking about, but it's bringing in that cachet, so they're doing it. What do you feel about the more mainstream that paranormal activities has gotten over the last decade?
I agree with you on you watch a lot of these reality TV shows and I'm just I can't even watch the commercials. I mean, they're absolutely ridiculous. And it just seems to be getting more ridiculous as it goes. And I think it's really cheapening the whole paranormal, alternate realities and all of that that's actually could be out there and kind of making a spectacle out of it.
Well, honestly, all the places that are supposedly haunted but try to downplay it and aren't out there selling tours and doing all these things to try to bring people in based off of that, that's when it gets really interesting, is when they're just like, hey, I heard this place is haunted. Oh, no, we don't want to talk about that. Like, just book a room with us or whatever. That's when it always seems more interesting, whether they're actually doing that to make it more interesting in a way, like that reverse psychology or whatever, or if it's actually, no, we don't want to be known for that. That's when it's just like, oh, I got to go stay there or check that place out, because that could be like more legit when they're not trying to make money off of just the fact that this place is supposedly haunted.
Well, that's what, I mean, when you look at I have a check system when I decide to watch a show that's based on anything paranormal or weird. And do they tell stories of just normal people who've had experiences? And if that's the case, then yes, I'm interested. Is it a bunch of idiots running around in a forest and every time they hear a sound, they're like, what was that? And it's like, what the hell do you think it is? You went out there looking for ghosts. I mean, sitting there every time you hear a sound and making a big spectacle out of it is, to me, just ridiculous. And I just don't even believe behind anything that they're doing. So I want to hear real people's stories. I don't want to hear people going out as a team and finding it, because I just don't think that that's real and realistic, especially if it's in one spot. Like, there's some ghosts of Shepherdstown, and I've tried watching it and it's so ridiculous. I can't even, they're like saying this whole town is haunted, kind of like, which we're going to be talking about, the movie It, kind of. And I just find it ridiculous. I mean, I just don't think that teams going out there and searching for ghosts is realistic.
Well, that's what kind of got the attention of some of the researchers I was talking to when I was on that other panel discussing what happened to us on the Queen Mary, was because the area that we were in was not known, even though the Queen Mary as a whole is known for being, haunted or whatever. The area that we were in, they were like literally writing down, like, where were you again? And what floor was this on? And because it wasn't a haunting that they had heard of before. So that it kind of made it all the more interesting that this wasn't something around the pool area that everyone knows about, or something around the area where all the men had died when the crash took place, or where the man had died when the door shut on him, or any of the kind of known things that happened aboard that ship. Well, Yardley, from a skeptic's perspective, do you think that the history of a place, the things that are verifiable, can be just as interesting sometimes? The people who actually died and the things that actually happened somewhere?
Well, absolutely. And I'm not going to say that I'm a full-blown skeptic. I think as we go along doing this podcast, we'll get a little bit of a better idea of all of our belief systems, or certain things that we might believe in and not. But I will say this. History plays a great part, because if someone goes into a community, and let's just say that we'll just use the generic haunted house as an example. If someone goes into a community and actually talks to the people who live in the community, they kind of get their feedback on what they think about the historical or paranormal significance of this said house. I'm pretty sure it would be interesting to see how, even though that there are similarities to different people's stories when referring to it, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be different as well. So I find that kind of a little bit more interesting than the place in itself. It's the people who grew up in the community. Everybody has their own personal story, and I find that that could be entertaining. But I'm the type of person that I don't think that it's always wise. Sometimes you can do it and justifiably feel like you can dismiss what someone says. If it's something that's just so ridiculous and easily provable, I think that you have to kind of take those people out of hat. But if it's something that you don't know, sometimes as people who may believe and people who don't believe, it's okay to say that you just don't know. You know, sometimes people want to double down on saying that they know something because they feel it or that they think it's the truth. Truth isn't necessarily a fact, because one person's truth might not be someone else's. So I think that kind of getting a more well-rounded and robust feeling of what's going on in that particular situation is probably vital for both sides of the spectrum of belief and non-belief.
Fair enough. All right.
Totally. Do you guys want to hear some crazy stories of celebrities who think they have had experiences? You want to hear non-verifiable crazy shit?
Well, I love me a good celebrity ghost story.
Oh, I know it. Okay, so I have 5, and they're crazy. Okay, so in 2012, Kesha. Now remember, this was when she was deep in her substance abuse, which I'm not making fun of her for that. I'm just saying, like, take this one with a grain of salt. She said that her song Supernatural was inspired by having gone to the, quote, bone zone with a ghost. So
bone zone is in, like, sex?
Yes. This is what this story is. Yeah, exactly. So actually I wanted to ask you guys, would you guys ever, if a ghost like came into your bedroom one night and you were kind of lonely, would you be feeling that or not?
Well, as somebody who's had a ghost in their bedroom, I can tell you that's the last thing from my mind when they're there. That's the last thing I'm thinking about. So I wouldn't think I would get like, oh, hello there. Unless it was like the ghost unless it was the ghost of like Elvis or something, because Elvis in his sober hot time, not old the Elvis, last dead bloated Elvis. No, I'd be like pass. But early Elvis, yeah, I could probably, I could open that up, sure.
Yeah, I suppose depending on the ghost, I would have to reconsider. But my thing is, I think if I saw a ghost, even if it was a hot ghost, my blood would probably be going in the opposite direction of where I needed to be able to do anything. I don't want to be laying in the bed with a ghost saying, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I would be that guy.
Instead of a cold shower, it would be cold blood. You'd be like, my blood literally ran cold.
Oh, man.
So speaking of hot people, Lucy Liu says that a heavenly being once came into her bedroom in 1999 and floated away after making her climax.
Oh.
I feel like if more men would just sort of come in, do their job, and then leave, that more women would be open to this sort of thing. So,
yeah, what a very giving ghost.
Yes. I would be open to that maybe, but if I knew beforehand somehow.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd says that he felt a ghost's presence in his bed, which was not a scene from Ghostbusters.
I mean, that was a scene from Ghostbusters.
Exactly. I just remember watching that scene as a kid with like my dad in the room and being super embarrassed that was on there.
Yeah, I had no idea what that was. It took like years of me growing. I mean, at the time, I was like, what happened? He just fell back asleep. It's like he fainted. Like I had no idea what was going on in that scene.
After going cross-eyed and his pants went down, it was so confusing. Yeah. Years of therapy later, now we know. And then To the surprise of nobody, Matthew McConaughey claims that he hangs out naked with a ghost, a female ghost named Madame Blue. He says that she's a cool ghost. I don't know what the hell a cool ghost versus a not ghost really is. Cool. I kind of wonder what his wife thinks when he's just like, yeah, I'm hanging out with Madame Blue. We're naked. Like, yeah, all right, man.
I am petty enough to be pissed as hell if my dude's hanging out with a ghost naked. Like, no, sorry, still cheating.
Especially if the dude is Matthew McConaughey. I feel like you're already sharing him with the masses. Exactly. Like, seriously, in your own home. Like, that should be the one place. And then finally, last year, Bobby Brown claimed that he wasn't, so this is a first, he was not high or tripping when he was mounted by a female ghost he fucking wishes in his bed. And of course, you can read about the rest of this encounter and his memoir that was coming out shortly after the interview that he did on this. So there's another one to take with a grain of salt.
I'm going to go ahead and say that ghost must have been on something, because have you seen Bobby Brown lately? I mean, he lives here in Atlanta and he just does not look good. Like, I can't imagine the ghost being sober for that one.
Well, what makes ghosts want to keep hanging out with us, though, to do stuff like that? Like, if you were a ghost, would you want to kind of expand out and to do and to see and to learn things that aren't necessarily attached to this place? Or is there something so special about Earth that it's that draw for supernatural beings?
I think it could be two things. A, I think they just like to fuck with us. And B, I think...
Maybe literally.
Yeah, or sometimes, yeah, literally. And then B, I think, how interesting would it be to come back and see from the other side, like, everything that we take so literally and everything that's in our lives going on that is just such a huge burden or stress, and not seeing life the way we could, and then coming back and actually viewing that from the other side. I think that would be pretty interesting to do.
Oh, wow. What about you, Moni?
I feel like if I had passed on, with the exception of making sure my family was all right, it would be fuck this shit o'clock, and I'd be like moving on up to go see what else is out there.
Here.
Again, if you had someone as hot as Matthew McConaughey hanging out naked, or Lucy Liu, maybe that's a different story. Yeah. But I can tell you that Bobby Brown is not who I'm going to hang around to see what's going on with him.
I've already told my kids, when I die, I'm going to haunt the shit out of you. So just expect it. Like, that's going to happen. Like, don't worry, I'll be around. You'll see me or hear me, or I'll, drop a light bulb. I'll do something. I don't know, because
they think mom sees everything now. Just wait.
Exactly. Just wait. I'll still be creeping on the other side. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm with Moni. I'm totally kicking rocks. Like, it's been real. But I'm out of here. I've seen enough, experienced enough. And with my luck, I'm going to check in on people and I'm going to see shit that I don't want to see. So yeah. I think I'm going to ride out,
I think, and this is just my own little personal theory, is I think death is just another level. It's just a dimension. I think you can come over here and there's really no element of time. So you can pop over here and then pop back over somewhere else, or go up to another dimension, or hang around, or come back as a guide for other humans. You can, I think there's a lot of options, and you got forever. So what's wrong with coming back here and checking out every once in a while?
That's a cool idea. I like it.
So speaking of the other side, other dimensions, and then also what we briefly talked on with the It movie is I'm super, super excited about this movie. You have no idea. I was pretty disappointed with the first one. I've been disappointed with most of Stephen King's movie adaptations. They just don't ever come close to his books. And no. I read it in middle school, and it scared the living shit out of me. I had to sleep with my lights on for like 4 months after I read that book. And then turning around and watching it on TV, it was just, that's it. That's what you got from that. Like, I know they tried, but trying to develop Stephen King's mind is is hard. I can just imagine, like, how do you do
made
that?
for TV, it's never gonna be great, right? Like Tim Curry can only do so much, but they didn't really let, in my opinion, Pennywise have a lot of license in that film. Like he was just sort of a side note, which is really sad, quite frankly, especially when you have Tim frickin' Curry.
Yeah.
But I agree, but also 80s, late 80s, early 90s, working with children, like made for TV, you're not going to get a lot of blood, especially back then. This is not Showtime or HBO today either. Like there was only so much they were going to be able to do. I'm glad that they're doing it now and hopefully doing it justice.
Well, I mean, even other, Cujo and Christine and all the other movies that they've attempted just were poor. They just did not pull through, what could have been. Pet Sematary, Salem's Lot. And I think that they just gave up, and that's why the TV tried to take over. And you just couldn't happen. The Mist has probably, to me, been the best play over from the book. I watch that movie all the time. I absolutely love it. They did a great job on making what they could from the book, pulling those feelings out. And that's what's been lacking for so long. So I don't want to get my hopes up, but they're already up. So let's just be honest. On this movie, it looks, just from watching the trailers, it looks like they've got it. I mean, just watching the balloon, they've got it. Even the balloons that you watch traveling, like I get the heebie-jeebies just looking at it. And I'm like, oh, please let the whole movie be this way. Because you really get pissed when the trailer is good and then you sit down and literally the trailer was good. The whole movie, rest of the movie sucked.
Okay, so this year during San Diego Comic-Con, I had the opportunity to get on a creepy bus in the middle of nowhere, which is always a good decision, I feel like. And it was all done up for the It movie, the new one, of course. And we got to sit down with a virtual reality experience that was personalized to all of us, and like a big old headset and whatever. And it was really freaky. There were some missed opportunities, I felt like, in that they could have, because it's a 360 virtual reality experience, they could have had like Pennywise come up behind you or go kind of like over the ceiling on top of you. And they didn't do any of that. I'm assuming because they didn't want anybody to have a heart attack and liabilities and whatever. But they did have, we were talking about the balloons being scary. There were some times when the balloons would come up and you would sit there and you would be like, okay, these balloons are going to pop in my face. I know that these balloons are going to pop in my face. They're just balloons. I'm safe. It's virtual reality. It's not actual reality. And yet the balloon popped in my face and I screamed like a little bitch. Like the whole experience. They drop you in Derry, the haunted town of the film and book fame. And Pennywise is there, of course, and he's heckling you. He's just telling you, like, come closer. Are you too scared? This and that. And oh my God, also, like, of course, they're using the real actor, like the character based off of him, Bill Skarsgård, who is amazing. And you're up close to him and you can just tell. I'm trying to like not think about being there, like not get too into it because I didn't want to freak myself out too bad. And I was like, look at the makeup, look at the actor. This is an actor. This is not real. And they made him look so freaking good, and his acting just really brings you in. And then at the end of the whole situation, he starts going, you'll float, you'll float, you'll float. And indeed you do start floating. You start going up from the sewer and you're like, I'm floating. I'm getting out of here. All the scary is going to be over. And then they fucking drop you.
Oh my God.
And you're in one of those chairs that actually simulates like movements. And so when they drop you, you feel the quote unquote impact when you hit the ground. And then that's the end of the whole simulation. And oh my God, like it made me want to see the movie even more. And I am so excited. I've got my advance tickets and I want to read the book again, but who has time with two small children to read over 1,000 pages? But I might do it anyway, maybe audiobook. I don't know, but I'm so excited.
I've always, ever since I was very small, been terrified of clowns. So that already is, I have going against me. And anything basically that's a doll or animatronic, clowns, all of that. I don't know why I'm afraid of clowns. I have had nightmares about clowns since I was little. I've never even owned a clown or seen a clown. And so this is pretty much my worst nightmares coming onto screen. And if they had just now, I can't remember because it's been so long since I've read the book, but if there's spiders, then that's it right there. Like I'll be in my worst nightmares come to life. So I'm so excited. I love to be scared. So I'm a freak that way. I love to be afraid. I love to be scared. It's a safe fear. So many things that, happen in life are not. These kinds of things are safe. So bring it on.
Well, you know what? That's something that'll probably make both of you happy is the early reviews for the movie have come out, and it's been getting some pretty good praise. People were saying that they were doing a good job of not only adapting it, but also there are some things that they made their own. And it appears that along with the tone of the movie, the R rating, that they respected the source material, but they also gave a little bit of rope to the actors to do their thing, to kind of put their own mark on the movie. So that's kind of exciting to me. Very rarely will I go to see a scary movie, but lots of times when these movies are R-rated, it's just about a lot of gore and not necessarily a lot of substance. And it seems like this is it's a good movie that'll please people who are book readers, but also people who haven't read the book and might be a little bit familiar with the story from the 1990s.
That's what the magic of Stephen King is he can. I mean, he writes several different types of horror, but most of them are a mix of gore and absolute psychological, like just everything that could completely terrify you in every type of way you could ever think possible. He does an amazing job on pulling that out. And I think that's why it's so hard to make his movies, because if you can't, you sometimes just can't put that on the screen. And I'm really hoping they figured out how to do that this time.
But what about expectations, though? I think that anybody who reads a book and has been watching TV for an extended amount of time knows that you can't totally translate things in all of its accuracy from the book, because there are lots of things that you have to deal with in a production that you don't have to deal with when writing a book, namely time. There are certain money issues, certain times that you can shoot. What are people's schedules? So I think that constricts the amounts of things that people can do. And it's also a risk. A lot of scary movies don't do ridiculously well. So I think that the people who do TV and movies, they're kind of constrained. It's kind of like when we talk about George R. Martin and the adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire to television. The expectations, especially for people who don't work into production, sometimes it can be irritating, because people are like, a lot more has to go into things that you as a fan might be simple to do. So hopefully, I wish these guys luck, and I'm actually on the borderline of actually going to pay to see this movie.
Let's go together, Yardley. Come on.
Hey,
you'll float too, Yardley.
If I'd never be that lucky.
You have no idea what that means, you'll float too, but it's not a good thing. You'll see.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. I understand, so many books. I'm a bookaholic, and have learned through the years not to have too many expectations on adaptations from book to movie or book to TV show. I think I haven't read all the books from Game of Thrones, but from what I can tell, they're doing pretty good with it. I've also read Outlander. They're doing a fantastic job pulling it over. But of course, you've got a whole series, so you don't have to worry about running out of too much time. My concern about it is the mental horror that you go through reading that, because you just can't put what everybody's individual imagination has from reading onto a movie. So I'm not expecting it to be exactly the way I felt when I was in middle school and, afraid to even look down my sink drain for months at a time. But I'm expecting something better than the last one. And from what I can tell, that's happening. So that's a good thing.
Honestly, and as the person who's supposed to be the librarian, the book person here, I feel like some authors need some editing, and it's kind of an exciting idea to think of. I mean, even the psychological, yes, they need to catch that. I really hope they do that this time. But like George R.R. Martin is definitely an example of someone who needs some freaking editing. And I am sorry, like, to get off the topic a little, but Game of Thrones has been so much tighter since they have gotten off that guy's like agenda. Okay.
That's true.
And even just from having read it when I was, of course, in middle school as well, I remember, and maybe it was because I was so young that some of the psychological stuff was just like, we're still talking about this guy's emotions or this guy's feelings or whatever. And I really just want to get to the next action part. Maybe that's just who I am. Like, why isn't shit blowing up yet? Why isn't someone getting naked? Like, come on, let's have some stuff happen.
well, what about this? I mean, we also have to think of it in this situation. Anytime that you're adapting something from a book to TV or the movies, you also have to know that the people who write these things are writing them for the non-book readers, who are the majority of the people who go and see this. You know, if only the people who were diehard fans of materials went and saw these movies, then every last one would flop. So I know a lot of people who get invested in reading the books, like whether it's Stephen King novels or George R.R. Martin's books. Seeing as we might have been in it from the beginning, we get a false sense of ownership of the material, when in reality, it's the people who aren't like us, aren't the people who talk about it, aren't the people who read the books, aren't the people who go to the conventions. Those are the people who are keeping what our passions are relevant, because they're spending the most money in mass.
What would you call us people who've read the books and then get shitty and snobby about the movies? Would be like book-splainers. Oh, you're a book-splainer. Like, we're over here going, that's not actually how it went down. And this movie is now ruined and it sucks. And no. And everybody else is like, can't I just like the fucking movie? Like, give me a break, which I can do that. I can like a movie and like a book separately. But there's a few out there that I'm like, don't mess with the book. And it would be one of those. And so this is like, you know, Christmas, Halloween, Kwanzaa, everything all wrapped up in one for me.
Well, I kind of hope and believe that the brilliance of Stephen King in this particular story is that this supernatural entity is something that takes on the form of whatever your worst fear is. And that's why hopefully not, I don't know, the spider is going to be coming into play, and all these different fears for each character is going to see what is most scary to them. Spoiler alert. Minor spoiler alert. And so I feel like the psychological aspect is there. Like, you tell someone that who hasn't read the book and already they're like, ooh, that's fucked up, right? Like, that sounds scary already. So I feel like that's kind of built in, hopefully, just by what it's about. And the rest, knock on wood, fingers crossed, is going to fall into place.
Yeah, well, here's hoping. So, Yardley.
Yes, ma'am.
I hear you have a story to tell about Princess Diana.
Well, it's
I'm
interesting.
Interested in hearing it.
Well, on August 31st, it's going to mark the 20th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. And I was doing a little snooping around because, if you go to the store, she's on, tons of magazine covers. And I think that this is probably going to be something kind of big for those who follow the royal family. But there's a Japanese psychic named Ryuo Okawa who wrote a book and claims to have interviewed Princess Diana's Lonley Ghost. He says that he spoke to her spirit earlier this month at a Japanese lecture hall. And he asked all types of questions to her. It's a really when he talks about it very nonchalantly. That could kind of lull you into thinking, hey, maybe he did talk to her. But some of the things that they talked about was, in particular, her car accident, the Queen, the royal family in general, Charles, and on her death. Now, have either of you had the opportunity to read the article or to watch the video that accompanied it?
I actually read the article and watched some of the video. First of all, I want to say that if Princess Diana is coming back from the dead, I can't imagine her going to a lecture hall, because who in the hell who would even living want to go to a lecture hall? That's like the most boringest place on earth. But moving forward, I am really skeptical of this story. Shocker, because I usually believe anything and everything. First of all, maybe because I haven't read the book, I didn't really get much personal. I mean, everything he was saying was basically what any, two-dime psychic would say. You're going through a troublesome time, and then, feel it out from there. But I feel bad for Princess Diana, because I can't imagine, talk about beating a dead horse. I mean, let the poor lady die, rest in peace, rip, let's let her go finally. I was devastated let her rip, man. I was devastated when she died. I loved Princess Diana. It was all of 23 years old, getting ready to go out. I think it was a weekend night, I believe. And, actually couldn't go out, which for a 23-year-old, hitting the town, it must be a big deal for you to not want to go out. But I was so devastated. I just couldn't. I couldn't believe she died. I loved her. I followed everything she did as best you can without internet back in the day. But I'm struggling with buying what this guy's selling.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen this story, but I'm with Kristi on the having loved that woman, even though I was a little bit, not to rub salt in the wound, little bit younger than that, but I do remember her passing.
Get it? I'm old. I get
it. She bore more than a passing resemblance physically to my mom, but that's where the resemblance ended. And she seemed super, super awesome. And what do they call it? The People's Princess or something like that. And I really do think that we ought to let her, let me Princess Diana alone. She must be rolling over in her grave. Everybody talking about they're talking to her today and what she said and all this shit. What the hell,
Well, that plus then you've got all these people that know her, and they're here's writing books about things that she told them or did, or which probably aren't really true. They're just making that up for a book. And this guy, unless he's got something really good to bring to the table that wasn't already out there, I'm not going to buy it.
Well, and also, when you read the article, some of the ways that the conversation reads out is actually funny. And I don't know if that is a result of the person who talked to her, the way that they wrote it down, interpreting what she said, but it sounds kind of weird. So quickly, I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts here. So he asked her about the accident. So Okawa, you actually died in a car accident in Paris 20 years ago. Diana, car accident? Oh, Okawa. Yes. Do you remember the situation? If you remember, could you tell us about the accident? Diana, car accident. There was a car accident and I was carried into the hospital. After that, I'm sleeping, but still living. Now, do you guys think that maybe it was lost in translation, or this is just a guy who's just trying to monetize on the death of Princess Diana?
That sounds like the most obvious. I mean, if you were going to guess on what someone who had an accident and died in it was going to say about their accident, pretty much I went to a hospital and then I was sleeping is a little on the nose, right?
I just feel like there's no personal part of what he's saying. If maybe when you're dead, you don't think about these things, but I think the first thing I would be saying is, where's my kids? How are my kids? I've been sleeping for this long, then where's the personal touch to what she's saying? it just doesn't make it's not making any sense to me. And maybe it's because he's Japanese, and we're interpreting what he's saying, interpreting from what he's saying, getting from a ghost. I mean, who ever heard of Chinese phone booth or whatever that game used to be called when I was a kid, where you whisper in somebody's ear and then by the end, what doesn't make any sense. So maybe we're, completely losing it through the English translation of his language. I don't know, but it just, none of it was really, honestly, when I felt bad reading it. I felt guilty just reading what he was saying. Like, bad. Like, oh my gosh, this is so wrong. Like, who would do this? It just did not feel like, I'm not dead, so I can't speak for how you communicate when you're dead, but as
if she was going to talk to anybody, why the fuck would she talk to this guy? Like, of all people, like, who's this guy? Like, yeah. I don't know.
In a lecture hall of all places, but
yeah.
I mean, it's
Convenient.
Interesting. Maybe I'll read the book, but I don't want to give him a dime, so I have to find some bootleg copy or something. I don't know, but
get it from the library.
Yeah, so I can, because I just enjoy that feeling of guilt so much. I'm just going to go read the whole book, but because I want to look for something like reading the excerpts that were provided on the article. I was just like, this does not have any. She called Prince Charles the devil. And which I could see from her end why she would say that. She didn't really talk about the kids much. It wasn't like, that's the first thing I would be asking,
Yeah.
I'm dead? Well, how are my kids? Like, holy crap. Yeah, no. So I don't know. It's disturbing to me to see people do that.
For sure.
What do you think, Yardley?
I'm on board with pretty much everything that both of you said. It's just kind of weird. And I have not read the book in its entirety. And of course, there are a lot of other things that he does go over in the book. And I kind of think that if we do a little bit more research into this, possibly where they were at, they were doing, what do you call it? When you summon the dead, is that a seance? Right.
Yeah, depending. Yeah.
Okay. Or something along that nature. I think that was what they were doing, because I don't think that he was the only psychic that was there. But I just find it interesting that, a lot of the questions that she asks, sometimes when you're reading her statement, she doesn't seem to really be sure that she knows exactly what's going on. So that's why I was wondering about interpretation. But I don't know.
Does she know she's dead? That's basically the question.
Yeah. So, off the top of my head, I definitely want to call bullshit. If you ask me to bet on, of all people that Diana would speak to, it would be this guy. I couldn't count it out, but I would probably say no. But it's just kind of funny how he's interpreting what she was saying. And hey, you know what? I think that there is a common thread, because I have read in different situations or different people's accounts of talking to ghosts that sometimes the ghosts don't know where they're at. I don't know what that means, but this isn't the first time that I have kind of heard a similar type of thread in multiple stories.
I've watched one of my favorite shows, and a lot of people think it's cheesy and campy, is The Hollywood Medium. And it's this literal kid. He's maybe 20, 21, who goes to celebrities' houses and does readings for them. And he doesn't know, first of all, he doesn't know whose house he's going to. They never tell him where he's going. And second of all, he's so young that most of the people that he's reading, he doesn't know who they are. And speaking of Bobby Brown, he read Bobby Brown and had no idea who Bobby Brown was. He's like, had no idea who this guy is. And he's doing his reading, and he reads him and picks up his daughter and Whitney Houston and has no idea that's who he's channeling. Like, he's communicating for them and saying, this person wants you to know this. This person wants you to know this, this, and this. And it was uncanny. Like, he was even saying things that weren't even, the public doesn't know. It was, and he's done that before. He did that with Jim Belushi. He channeled him and had no idea who that was, and Robin Williams, which he knew who Robin Williams was, but at the time didn't know that's who it was. He had to be told later after the reading that's who this person was. And in all the time that I've seen these shows, he's never picked up on somebody that's passed that doesn't know their past. So either this guy can pick up on people that don't know they're dead, or that's bullshit. And when you die, you know you're dead. And so I think if you're young and you're a child and you cross, I think that it's possible to get confused and not know where you are. And maybe your family that has crossed over can come help you. I don't know. I just have a really hard time believing when people die, they don't know they're dead. I don't know.
Well, honestly, if there's some way that she didn't know, if that is true at all, like, how sad is that?
It's so very sad.
Either it's bullshit, or he's bothering someone who's in a sleep state, I guess, of their death, and hopefully in peace, and now he's waking them up to bug them in a freaking lecture hall. Like, that's pretty fucked up either way, I would say.
I think a lot of the times when you have spirits that are still here, either are here for a reason, they're don't want to cross, maybe they're afraid, maybe they're still have unfinished business, but I just have a hard time believing they don't know they're dead. I mean, how can you not know you're dead? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that if you're dead and can't communicate with anybody, maybe you're stuck in a warp that you only see what was real at the time that you died. I don't know. It just makes no sense to me. So,
well, reading this thing is probably more so along the lines of, if you can see anything after you're dead, is her not necessarily being willing to acknowledge that she's not there, because there are other excerpts in there that essentially has her saying that she knows that people she's related to are buried at a certain place, but she doesn't seem to think that she's there with them. That was something that I took out of that as well. So at least coming from this perspective of the story that this guy is telling, I think that she might be ignorant of the fact that she's dead, which I'm with you, Kristi. I don't really know. I don't know how you can reconcile not really knowing. So maybe it's non-acceptance.
Maybe, I mean, she did die violently, so maybe she doesn't. I don't know.
I have heard that theory, though, when people die suddenly and unexpectedly, like not when you have a disease or things like that. And that was actually coming back to the Queen Mary. One of the things that they said is one of the theories as to some of the hauntings that take place near the front of the ship, where the ship was struck suddenly by a smaller boat and everybody there just died. And it was kind of out of the blue for them. Everybody was just kind of floating along in the ocean, and the next thing they were dead. I've heard that when it comes about that quickly, that it could actually bring the spirit or whatever to not know, or maybe not accept. Maybe they know, but it's like kind of like in life where you don't accept something has happened to you that's really obviously traumatic. So who knows? I mean, maybe we'll have to do a seance and we can ask her ourselves.
I always feel like those people like have nobody who is crossed over that gives a shit about them, because I can't imagine, like, if I had died and then my child, dies unexpectedly and is stuck here, has no idea what's going on, that I'm not going to go through hell and high water trying to find them to make sure that they make it over safely. I mean, that just seems like a no-brainer, that your people that have loved you, that have crossed on, would come and help you. But maybe, I don't know, who knows? I know nothing. I'm not dead. So this is all hearsay for me, but just from what little bit I've ever had experienced from my end, and then talking to others that are psychics or sensitives, and they actually see dead people, you've got to know you're dead. I don't know. But Anyway, it's an interesting theory, and I would love to read what it says, but again, without giving him any profit, because I have major skeptics. I have some major questions about that whole story.
For sure.
I can dig it.
Well, I believe that wraps up our very, very first Creepin' It Real. And I promise throughout the next episodes, we'll work out the kinks and figure this out. I'm literally operating on a wing and a prayer here. So we appreciate you listening and look forward to next week.
Hell yeah. Or maybe we'll bring more kinks. Maybe that's what our audience is into. We don't know yet.
The good kinks, not the bad ones, please.
Right. Exactly.
Knock on wood.
And once again, you can email us at keepingitrealshow@gmail.com. If you happen to have any stories, you have any links that you want us to check out and talk about on the show, we are definitely open. We will read them and definitely take it into consideration. Your feedback is very important. And once again, you can follow us on Twitter at creepin_it. And you can go to the website, creepingitrealshow.com. So until next time, ladies, you have a great weekend.
You too.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
See you on the flip side.
Used to be afraid. I was enough of a man. I used to fear so